Қайырлы кеш, қайырлы таң. Шахризат, өте үлкен рахмет бүгін қосылғаныңа, және де осындай қызық тақырыпты талқылап бізбен бірге осындай пікірталасқа қатысуыңа біз мыңда бір алғысымызды білдіреміз. Бүгінгі біздің топтың ішінен мен ғана қосылып тұрмын, бірақ сәлден кейін менің әріптесім Аида қосылуы мүмкін. Енді Шахризат, өзіңді қысқаша таныстырып кетсең, одан кейін өзіңнің 20-25 минуттық презентацияңды өткізіп, одан кейін біз бірге талқыласақ болады сол тақырыпты. Қалай қарайсың?
Жақсы, рахмет.
Иә.
Менің даусым. Менің есімім Шахризат. Сәлем, серік болсын. Осы презентацияға шақырғаныма өте қуаныштымын. Мен қазіргі уақытта СДУ университетінде PhD-дің бірінші курс студентімін. Ал осы уақытқа дейін MA-ді Назарбаев университетінде MA in Multilingual Education 3-4 жылдай СДУ университетінде аға оқытушы болып қызмет атқардым. Одан кейін енді қазір PhD-дің бірінші курсы студентімін. Қазіргі менің сіздермен бөлісетін тақырыбым ол CLIL және ICC екі концепцияны қосып, осы екеуімен бір ресерч жасадық. Жасап жатырмын, яғни процестемін. Сол кішкентай ғана проектім туралы бөліспекшімін. Қысқаша осылай. My research interests are CLIL, ICC, intercultural communicative competence, multilingual education. And so, I think that's all for now.
Thank you so much for introducing your topic. So I'm just going to quickly repeat the name of the project that you are presenting today so that our English-speaking audience may be familiar with it. So Shahrizat is going to talk about her project titled Toward Ethnorelativism in Content and Language Integrated Learning, Kazakhstani Teachers' Intercultural Competence. And we are going to start the presentation part, and then everyone's going to have a chance to ask questions.
The title of my project is Towards Ethnorelativism in CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning, Kazakhstani Teachers' Perspective, or Kazakhstani Teachers' Intercultural Competence. So if we move on, there is the outline of my research. So in brief, as it is, introduction, research problems, questions, purpose, significance. I'll focus on literature review. Theoretical framework is the one that I just really like it, and the methodology, and of course ethical considerations. So to begin with, I'd like to start with the introduction. So we know that Kazakhstan hosts more than 100, or to be specific, 130 nationalities, and its educational system, there are 3 official mediums of instructions, and in some regions, in some thousand regions, there are even 4 languages of instruction, mediums of instruction, like Kazakh, Russian. Some subjects are taught in English, and there are also minority languages like Uzbek and Uyghur in some southern parts. Yes, we know that. And before, in 2007, the first President Nazarbayev launched, we know that the Trinity of Languages project to promote trilingualism in Kazakh, Russian, and English languages. But before that, I remember myself learning English to achieve like native proficiency in English. I remember that. I really tried to pronounce like natives. So I remember that notion, and I think around 2 decades ago. But then with the introduction of this trinity of the projects, according to some scholars, it transitioned towards promoting intercultural communicative competence. Before that, we tried to achieve native-like proficiency in English, but after the introduction of this project, we kind of focused mostly on intercultural competence. But however, some scholars like Wheeler say that we, as Kazakhstani citizens, can establish modern nation only by reaching proficiency in Kazakh language. So what it means is that we first need to acquire our own culture and our own Kazakh language, and only then we can master other languages. So it means that our source culture is as important as the target culture. If we want to succeed in target culture, in target language, then we need to firstly to develop our source culture, because it will be kind of basis for comparing, learning, understanding, respecting cultural diversity. So to be specific, the project Trinity of Languages, I'm sorry. To be specific, Trinity of Languages. The project focuses on Kazakh language as it develops Kazakh language. So there are a number of, as when I did my literature review, I remember that I found a number of activities, educational and social activities in different domains like media, education, and communities that are done to promote our source culture and establish the status of Kazakh language in Kazakhstan. In terms of Russian language, we know that Russian language is being used as a lingua franca, according to some scholars like Magulova, and Russian also serves as it has significant historical, political, and economic importance to Kazakhstan, according to Mazukevich, and the Russian serves as a bridge to the people from post-Soviet countries. And it also fosters cross-regional cross-regional ties and intercultural interaction among the citizens of former Soviet Union. So these are the roles of basically Russian language. And the English, we know that we need English language in order to be competitive in the global stage. So these are the main points of this project. Moving further into to the research problems, what I found is that when I did my literature review, as my topic is on science teachers' perceptions about science teachers' views on and use of ICC, I found that many studies mostly focus on language teachers, like English teachers' perceptions and conceptualizations of ICC were the main focus when I did my literature review. But on the other hand, in order to develop intercultural communicative competence in educational field, we need to have shared responsibility. So therefore, science teachers are also important. And we know that the second is that culture is integrated in CLIL. So according to Marsh, we need to also, culture covers content, culture covers communication and cognition as well. And according to Byram, teachers' misconceptions of ICC negatively impacts students' intercultural competence. So therefore, these were the main focuses of my main problems, basically, let's say like that, of my research. So coming to the research purpose, this qualitative study explores science teachers' perceptions of intercultural competence in CLIL classrooms, and then the next stage is to discover where science teachers fall on Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity scale and how they integrate culture and ICC in their teaching. So subsequently, I have some research questions like what are the science teachers' perceptions of intercultural competence, and then where science teachers in Kazakhstan place themselves on Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity scale, and in terms of their practice, how do they integrate culture within content and language? So these are my guiding research questions. In terms of research objectives, so I am in the process of data collection. So to explore science teachers' understanding and conceptualization. This are related to my research instruments, identify the strategies, practices used by science teachers. This relates to the observation section, and assess science teachers' self-reported levels of intercultural competence using Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity scale, and to discover their challenges and provide recommendations for professional development. I plan to conduct a workshop for science teachers after the completion of this research project. So in terms of the significance, there are theoretical significance and practical significance. So in terms of the theoretical significance, when I did the literature review, I remember that there were some studies mostly using Byram's model of intercultural competence, and I remember some studies that used Dyardov's and Fantini's, if I'm not mistaken, models of intercultural communicative competence. But and also there was one Bennett's developmental one study that used Bennett's developmental model. but it was quantitative study and not qualitative. So I believe that using qualitative within Kazakhstani context will have significance. And in terms of practical, as I said earlier, I plan to do workshop for science teachers after the completion of this project. And literature review, as I said, theoretical model is the Bennett's model of developmental model of intercultural sensitivity. I'm sorry, and I also focus on definitions, culture in CLIL, and the ICC research in Kazakhstan. Interestingly, there are some interesting studies related to ICC in Kazakhstan. For instance, Smarkova and Poltrot, they also did quantitative, if I'm not mistaken, they did mixed method study, but they applied Byram's model of intercultural competence, the model, not Bennett's model. And the focus was, if I'm not mistaken, language teachers, language teachers, in-service language teachers. But as I said, literature review showed a number of studies that focused on language teachers' perspective, not science teachers' perspective. So mine novelty is in terms of I'm doing research with science teachers. Okay, so moving on. So theoretical framework, as I said, I really love this theoretical framework. There are 2 pages related to theoretical framework, but I'd like to be a bit short. So this model was developed by Bennett in 1993. It was done using a grounded theory that used mixed method approach. There were tons of interview data and observations and surveys, yes. And one interesting fact is that this developmental model or this theoretical framework is mostly applied in quantitative studies, but there are a number of qualitative studies, but anyway, mostly applied within quantitative approaches. And there is a valid and reliable instrument to do quantitative, but unfortunately it's paid. So you need to pay, you need to get certified to use this model or this instrument, but unfortunately I couldn't afford it. So that's why I'm doing qualitative one, but anyway, there are a number of qualitative studies. So one of the challenges was to obtaining this instrument. So I decided to do qualitative. Basically, this developmental model of intercultural sensitivity consists of 2 stages. The first is ethnocentric stage. The second is ethnorelative. The first stage has denial, defense, and minimization stage, and the second stage, acceptance, adaptation, and integration. The thing with that is that in the first stage, participants or individuals assume that their culture is central. Like the second page has an example, like my culture is superior, other cultures are not. Like in a defense, we are superior, they are inferior. In minimization stage, the individuals only seek similarities. So this relates to the ethnocentric stage. After some intervention, after some experience with the culture, individuals tend to change or tend to develop ethnorelative perspective. Like they accept, even though they not agree with others, but they accept that there are different views. This is acceptance and adaptation and integration. But interesting thing is that this model, although shows the linear development, but research shows that it is fluctuated, sometimes cyclical. Sometimes some individuals may go directly to the acceptance, but in some other cultures, they can move back again to defense or even maybe to minimization or denial stage. So it's not fixed. It's not linear. It's kind of fluctuated and cyclical process. So this is shortly about the theoretical model or theoretical framework that I'm going to apply. And in terms of methodology, as I said earlier, qualitative approaches I'm going to use, multiple instrumental case studies, semi-structured interviews, document analysis of the teacher's CVs, because I'd like to see the interventions or workshops or whatever activities they have that can be easily visible from their CVs, and observations, real practices of cultural interventions. And in terms of participants, 8, but I'd like to increase the number to 10. University setting, one of the universities in Almaty. So I'm now in a data collection process. I got access, and I've already sent the recruiting brochures and so on. So coming to the data analysis. So here, as I said, data analysis, the next page. Here, apart from thematic analysis by Creswell, I'm going to apply conversation analysis of interviews by Brand and Mortensen, behavioral assessment of communicative competency of observation by Rubin, and the CV document analysis. One of the studies did this kind of data document analysis, Fitriah et al. So what is conversation analysis? That is basically what is conversation analysis? That's basically how people say something. If we know from the Creswell that if thematic analysis, what people say, in terms of conversation analysis, that's how people say it. This is in a second page, another page. So I'll focus mostly on, when I do conversational analysis, I'll focus on interaction, like turn-taking, repair mechanisms, pauses, overlaps, and Jefferson transcription system, like that's when you document pauses, like the participant smiled or laughed, or I don't know, the participant emphasized something specifically, and linguistic details, like there was a silence, maybe participants preferred some specific word choice, intonation, there was some certain intonation. So you record or you document this sort of, you document meticulously all the details during the interview, during the transcription process. So that's conversation analysis. And the next is document analysis. For the document analysis, as I said earlier, document analysis, as I said earlier, there are a number of questions, like, are there any examples of applying intercultural skills in teaching? How many languages does a participant knows? Is he multilingual? Mostly he is multilingual because it's science teachers and CLIL. But how many languages does the participant know? What's the language proficiency? Were there any professional development activities related to ICC or CLIL? So this sort of data can be easily visible from the CVs, because I asked for the updated version of their CVs. And in terms of observations, for the observations, as I said earlier, I'm going to use Rubin's behavioral assessment of communicative competency framework, which consists of a number of components like self-affiliation and support. Does a teacher foster respectful and supportive learning environment? This is kind of close to ZPD, yeah? So in a proximal development, self-disclosure. Does the teacher share personal experience that again relates to the culture? Does the teacher provides his or her own examples, lived examples? Empathy, does the teacher demonstrate understanding? Interaction management and behavioral flexibility. That's I kind of connected it with the translanguaging, because here, does the teacher adjust their language or methods to accommodate students with varying English language proficiency levels? Does the teacher allow translanguaging, or does he prefer one language at a time, or English on his own? So this sort of components relate to the behavioral assessment of communicative competence. And the next is message skills. Are their teachers' instruction clear and accessible to the students? That relates to the observation. And the data analysis, thematic analysis by Creswell, we know that it consists of 6 stages, like codes and themes. So I think that's quite straightforward. Well, well, at least we have an experience of using Creswell's thematic analysis. Yeah. And in terms of validity, here, as I said, to ensure trustworthiness in qualitative research, I'm applying data triangulation, 3 different data analysis, data collection instruments, member verification, sector description, and hopefully I'll find an external auditor after I complete my paper manuscript before submitting to certain journals. And in terms of the ethics, I think here I've already got research ethics approval, voluntary participation of the research participants, consent forms, confidentiality, observations will not cause any disturbance, and so on. CVs will be, the names of the CV, names within CVs will be coded. Yes, and yeah, I think I'm done. I'm sorry. So, тез айтып тастадым ау деймін.
Жоқ, өте үлкен рахмет, бәрі қызықты болды. Sweet and short and sweet дейді ма? Неде сондай болды ғой? Және де
This is my credit for
Yeah, as always, you are fast but efficient with everything. I remember how you managed to juggle everything while doing your MA, so I'm sure that you are doing the same kind of amazing job now, Gigi. So thank you so much, Shakhrizat, for sharing your work. Талқылау кезінде кез келген тілді қолдануға болады. Аида, Әсел, қосылғандарыңызға үлкен рахмет. Thank you so much for joining our conversation. And yeah, Shakhrizat did such a great job sharing this work. And now I'm going to ask some questions and then I will give an opportunity to do the same to Amir, Aida, and Asiel. So please prepare your questions in case you have any, and you will have a chance to ask them in a bit. So Shakhrizat, thank you so much for sharing your work once again. And while preparing for the meeting, I didn't have a clear idea of what exactly the theoretical foundation would be, right? So I wondered like if some of the things that I am familiar with would be relevant to what you said. For example, like critical race theory, where we focus on teachers or like people's experiences of decentering their own experiences and focusing on, let's say, the multicultural or multilingual students' experiences. So that's something that I thought of because in our context, we know that Kazakh teachers are the majority, right? But how do they understand interculturality or intercultural competence? I think that may come from a quite privileged perspective because to them, being Kazakh or considering the Kazakh identity like in the teaching context is the norm, right? So that's something that we thought of. Obviously, I'm not sure if it's something you thought of, but and also I feel like it's quite complicated when we think about race and culture together in the Kazakh context, right? Because we think that there's just one race because everyone is Asian or most of us are. But how does race play into this discussion or conversation? That's something I thought of. But more to what exactly you said, I think one thing I wanted to know is the philosophical coherence of different methodologies that you use. For example, you said that Bennett used mostly quantitative methodologies, right? So I was just wondering how your own approach aligns with their vision of research, because you're also using multiple data analysis methodologies like conversation analysis, behavioral assessment of your observations, right? And then CV document analysis and thematic analysis. How do they all come into a cohesive conversation with each other, and what exactly guided your choice of those methodologies in alignment with Bennett and your own perspective as a researcher? So if you can comment on that.
Okay. So I hope it's possible. I'm going to trans language. Yeah, біріншіден бізде Қазақстанда PhD-ге оқыған кезде бізде PhD Қазақстанда НУ-дағы магистратурадан мүлде бөлек. Себебі бізде есімде болса НУ-да қалай айтатын бізде көбінесе бір ғана direction, бір екі research question немесе я болмаса qualitative, я болмаса quantitative, simplify болды бізде. Мен солай түсіндім. Да. Бірақ бізде өкінішке орай деп айтайын ба, Қазақстанда PhD кішкене басқаша. Qualitative research біз мұнда Қазақстанда көбінесе онша саналмайды. То есть researchке онша саналмайды. Өйткені бізде не көрсетілу керек? Бізде цифралар көрсетілу керек, бізде там графикалар көрсетілу керек. Кешірім сұраймын деп балалар мына жерден шықпай қойды. Сондықтан да бізде және де бізде қазір скопусқа публикация керек. Міндетті түрде, чтобы PhD-ді бітіріп шығу үшін, 3 жылдың ішінде бітіріп шығу үшін. Және де презентация жасаған кезде басқа PhD-лердің алдында немесе басқа біздің қазақстандық профессорлар алдында қорқыған кезде ана жерде неше түрлі инструменттер болу керек. Яғни мен ол жерде тек қана интервьюменен шыға алмаймын. Маған айтады, интервью жеткіліксіз деп айтады. Сондықтан да мен бізге үйреткен сәйкес келген инструменттерді қолдануға тырыстым. Бізге осы тақырыптар ICC тақырыбы болған кезде біраз инструменттерді өттік, және де менің жүргізіп жатқан қазіргі проектіме осы data collectionдар сәйкес келді. Өйткені, as I said, the purpose is to explore science teachers' perceptions and their experience of integrating ICC in science education, and where do they fall on Bennett's model. То есть, былайша айтқан кезде, Беннеттің бағана көрсетіп кеткен екі стейдж бар емес па, ethnocentric немесе ethnorelative, сол жерде қай жерде тұрғанын анықтау үшін. Сондықтан да бірнеше инструменттер қолдануға тура келді. Көрсету керексің сен. Мына жердегі біздегі Қазақстандағы профессорлерге мен осыншама инструменттерді қолданамыз деген көрсету керек. Ал екіншіден, Беннеттікі келісемін, ол көбінесе quantitative стадияларда қолданған, бірақ qualitative'тер бар. Өзі де qualitative, бір-екі qualitative'терді жасады, бірақ енді ол жерде кішкене biased болуы мүмкін, когда data анализ жасаймын ғой, сол кезде кішкене biased болады енді деп ойлаймын, но that will be my limitation, I guess. But there are a number of studies that apply Bennett's model in qualitative studies.
Okay.
If I got your question understood your question correctly.
I think there are a few things that I was curious about. For example, when we do quantitative research, our perspective is informed directly by the literature or a specific model, right? For example, you are using Bennett's DMIS model, and I guess your answers, so that the answers that you see will be directly informed by them. So the coding process is a bit more deductive, right? So, but in thematic analysis, or let's say in your observations, you can't really just look for like one or two things. There will be things that emerge or like appear from the data based on your own personal experiences as a researcher and lived experiences and some other theories, right, outside this model. So that's what I was wondering about, and how you are going to reconcile those very different worlds of research, quantitative and qualitative. Because for me, like, for example, my research, initially my model was just like, like translanguaging identities and language ideologies. But then I discovered many other things along my journey of data analysis. And I realized that, oh, I think that these things are relevant because those ideas emerged in my conversation with the participants or something. So I was just wondering about that, but I feel like I know what you mean, and I hope the process is smooth. But yeah, I think this is something to think about, like how will you account for your own positionality as a researcher, and how your interpretation is informing this interpretation, your perspective is playing into the interpretation of the data, right? Like, so yeah, that's something to think about. But yeah.
Жоқ, тағы да бір қосып кететін мәселе. Қазір мен енді data collection процесіндемін ғой, былайша айтқан кезде. Енді одан кейін data collection жинап болғаннан кейін, raw data-ны оқып көргеннен кейін, менің ойымша тағы да әлі Беннеттің моделі ғана емес, тағы да басқа фреймворктар, theoretical фреймворктар қосылады. Өйткені мен тағы да бір фреймворкты оқыдым, cultural historical theory деген бар. Мен сен сторисынан тоже көріп қалдым, race theory, critical race theory оқыдым. Қарап шықтым, то есть мен соны қосайын ба дедім, өйткені culture has race, culture is about race actually, yeah? It covers, бірақ бұл біздің контекстке кішкене басқаша болып келе ма деп ойлап тұрмын. Сондықтан мен cultural historical theory деген бар, қателеспесем. Егер ол әрине дейтаға байланысты, мен дейтамнан көре алсам, мен оны қосамын. Но тек қана Беннет ол фиксит емес дегім келеді, тағы да қосылады. Бірақ data collection барысында оқып көргеннен кейін қосылады әрине. Қандай дейтаға байланысты.
Чаттың ішінде сенің айтқан нәрселеріңді жазып қойдым. Жалпы менің ойымша бұл жерде бар ғой, race деген, it may not be the focal point of your research, obviously, but I think that it informs certain perspectives, right? Like, because racism is connected to ethnocentrism, right? Because we think of our own culture as central, dominant, as the norm. So how do we disrupt that ideology, right? So that's something to think about. And I guess platforming marginalized voices in our context and considering other cultures to be more empathetic and to develop solidarity. I mean, we need that. So
that's really nice. I got really just like got insights from reading your theory, like critical race theory.
I'm glad.
I think depending on my data, I might add this because again, so yeah, I got really some ideas. So it depends on my data, so I try to add it.
Because I mean, it also of course depends on the context, right? And Kazakhstan, I think that race is usually in the background. It's not in the center, but it's still important, you know, because in my context, it's a bit more focal because of the very different races that exist in the same space, right? So yeah, but I like it. But also there's this concept called multi-racism, and it's about how race manifests or racism manifests itself differently in different contexts. So I think that ethnocentrism could be one form of racism if you apply this model of racism, you know, so you can think about it. And also intersectionality is something that I work with a lot nowadays. And it's, again, directly related to what you mentioned, since ethnorelativism and ethnocentrism are about power, right? It's about hegemony of certain identities and perspectives. So I think that you may want to consider this as well in considering culture in relation to other identities, like languages that people speak that you mentioned, right? Like, do they represent certain minorities in our context or so on? So yeah, thank you so much once again for sharing this. And now I would like to shift the focus to our attendees. So Aida and Asiel, if you have any questions, please share your perspectives and let us know.
Шахризат, көп рахмет. Мен басын жіберіп алдым, сондықтан кішкене кейін түсіндім сіздің қазір PhD жұмысыңызды таныстырып жатқаныңызды. Менде мынандай сұрақ болды. Және participant сізде science teachers қой. Сонымен осы этнорелативизм, олармен қалай зерттеу болды, мен соны түсіне алмай қалдым кішкене.
Ethnorelativism, science teachers бізде CLIL teacherлар, то есть мен specifically CLIL teacherларды алдым, олар CLIL-ді оқыған, CLIL курсын алған, CLIL арқылы беретіндер. CLIL has culture within, actually, according to Marsh'тың айту бойынша, CLIL culture, culture covers all other Cs. Және де сол жағынан, яғни қалай айтсам екен, қай тілде айтатын шатасып кеттім кішкене.
Өзіңізге ыңғайлы тілде айта беріңіз.
Қазір. Яғни Беннет олардың жауаптарына байланысты, интервью барысындағы сұрақтарының жауаптарына байланысты, мен олардың Беннеттің жаңағы ethnocentrism or ethnorelativismге сәйкестендіруге тырысамын. Түсіндіре алсам.
Иә, маған негізі сол CLIL-дан бөлек қазақ тілінде беретін адамдардың да несі қызық болар еді деп ойлаймын, перспективасы. Өйткені бәрібір де сондай бір...
Иә, керемет. Дұрыс айтасыз, өйткені source culture бар бұл жерде. Иә, дұрыс айтасыз. Ол жағын ойлап көрмеппін. негізі қазақ тілінде беретін мұғалімдермен де өткізуге болады. Керемет болады деп ойлаймын.
Сондай кросс comparison күшті шығатын сияқты осы, егер екі түрлі топ не істеген кезде біреуі континуумның мына жағында, екіншісі ана жағында болуы мүмкін деген сияқты. Сәттілік анализ жасайды.
Осыны тыңдап отырып мен ойлағаннан so I think that, I don't know, it would be so interesting to hear teachers' perspectives on what culture is, like what do they understand it as, and then what do they mean or understand as ethnorelativism, right, or ethnicity and all that. So like I remember when I was interviewing my participants, I started with very basic questions like, so what is translanguaging to you? You know, because we are assuming that we understand what they understand as translanguaging or culture, but usually we don't. And it's such a broad concept too, right? So I hope you can explore it with your participants as maybe like a warm-up question, you know, before transitioning into the more complicated and abstract concepts. Selim ballar. Yeah, Sunday. Yeah, now I wonder if Asel has any questions. Asel, you are welcome to unmute yourself, and Kazakhsha, Russia, Ағылшынша, translanguaging, everything is welcome here. So go ahead, please.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for this session. Actually, as I said before, yes, in the chat, I am a third course student, so I guess I do not have enough knowledge to fully understand the research, but I got some ideas and I'm thinking about continuing my journey, and I'm choosing between like, should I choose more some programs which focuses more on the policy of the education, or just do some like, for example, like in Nazarbayev University, multilingual education, because it's also very interesting how languages work, and especially the how can we make better methodology for teachers of STEM subjects. And I guess that's the main. I had some questions, but I actually forgot, because the topic is quite hard for me now, I guess. And in order to fully understand, I guess I need to more read it and do it several times. So I'm sorry.
No, thank you so much, Asel, for your question. And I think that, again, we need to think about our audience, right? Shakhrizat, Aida, like we are trying to connect theory with practice and make this content more accessible to in-service teachers or pre-service teachers like Asel. So I think that you gave us this very important reminder, you know. So I wonder how Shahrazad mentioned that she will deliver some workshops based on her study, right? So I wonder how something like this might help Asil determine her answer, you know, for her future. Like, do you think that she could maybe apply this at the policy level? Like, what are the implications of ethnorelativism and interculturality and intercultural competence for policymakers or emerging policymakers? And what can researchers do for this? If, for example, Asiata chooses to focus on this in her upcoming, let's say, master's research, you know, like some takeaways for her. What do you think, Shakhrizat?
Well, in terms of significance or from different stakeholders' perspective, well, I only thought for now, I thought only from the perspective of science teachers. Like, as I said, after identifying their position on Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, I can conduct workshops related to ICC and the ways practical, in terms of practicality, how to integrate ICC into their teaching science, because they are supposed to integrate ICC and culture in CLIL classes. So, but I haven't thought about for the significance for the policy making. Yes, policy levels. So I'm thinking from the bottom up, let's say like that. Yes, I'm trying to do something from the bottom up approach, like the thing that I can do from bottom-up approach is doing the workshops. But in terms of policymakers, I'm not sure, but I think I need to think of what I can do or what I can recommend for the policymakers. But I think, but when I did my literature review, interesting thing that is that I couldn't find any documents, policy documents, especially related to ICC. There are some concepts related to ICC provided by Kunanbayeva, who is a professor, I think, at Inyaz University in Almaty. But I couldn't come up with the specific steps or strategies related to ICC. I read it, but unfortunately I couldn't understand that document. But so what I can say is that there are no specific clear policy documents related to ICC in Kazakhstan, unfortunately.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I think
So maybe we can start from the policies, yes, or at least
Yeah,
adding some aspects in state programs.
Yeah, you touch on such an important topic, and I suddenly remember Aida and other people involved in the multilingualism conceptualization paper, or like the conceptualization of multilingualism at some point, and how that whole thing was kind of sidelined because of all the complicated issues that happened back then in the ministry, right? So I'm just thinking about how important it is to approach such problems or topics ecologically from different perspectives rather than just relying on bottom-up approaches, because again, the change needs to be systemic rather than bottom-up only, right? Because if we focus just on one teacher, educator, or researcher and rely on them only, then there won't be enough substantial change, you know. So I hope that your takeaways will be heard by policymakers, and there will be more important conversations in the ministry and other important spaces where we can platform researchers and hear them properly, right? So yeah, I hope that they consider research rather than just treating it as something that needs to be published and forgotten, you know, because that's how I feel about research, to be honest, because what exactly are we changing? You know, we are publishing, yes, but is it being taken up by policymakers, by practitioners that don't have the same kind of affordances or capacity to understand complicated conversations like ours, right? Қазақша, орысша немесе трансленгуджинг арқылы осы біздің зерттеуімізді қалай таратамыз? Оларға осы оңай қолжетімді еткізе аламыз ба? Олардың уақыты бар ма бізді тыңдауға? Мысалға, осындай кездесулер ұйымдастырасың, мысалға, бірақ көбінесе келетіндер ол Аида, Шахризат сияқты осы зерттеушілер ғана, ал әсел, мысалға, немесе басқа адамдар, олардың мүмкіндіктері бола бермейді, мысалға, дұрыс па? Себебі тілі қиын, немесе уақыттары жоқ деген сияқты. So yeah, I think we need to stop gatekeeping and create more accessible spaces and approach this topic ecologically, you know. But yeah, very important topic that you touched on, you know. Yeah. Is there anything that emerged in your minds after listening to us?
I'm
Yes,
yeah, please. I agree with Sirboz and Tastenbek about like last sentences. I hope that I have understood them totally right. And I wanted to ask about like your research areas, your programs. So your main goal, as I understood, is to analyze how the language, how the information is perceived through the language, and to make it like analyze the ways and make it more easier, or something like this. Is it that, or it is just a little bit different?
I guess this question is for everyone, but Shakhrizat, like I can briefly touch on this. So I said if you're asking about the program multilingual education, then it's a bit different. It doesn't really focus just on language, right? And the topics are not limited to that, and it's quite broad. But I think that you may want to maybe have a separate chat on this topic with me or You can also
Okay.
email Shahrzad or Aida if you're interested in our respective programs. But for now, let's focus on the topic at hand, right? So Shahrzad's topic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Asil. So I think that another thing I can touch on then is how you approached ethnorelativism as a spectrum. And I really like that Bennett also kind of provides a model for that, right? And you said that it's not linear, so it's bidirectional. So just because a teacher is, let's say, at some advanced level of ethnorelativism doesn't mean that they cannot reverse their journey and, I guess, regress, right? So
Yes,
so like,
yes.
can you maybe touch on that once again and say how you understand or how you understand that progress, and also what might influence their, let's say, backward journey, you know, like what might influence their decision making or perspectives? What do you think?
Well, what I think is that what can affect is that I think experience. It might be negative experiences, or maybe they had specific stereotypes regarding certain nationalities, for instance, that also might affect their regress from that continuum. Yep? Basically, and the thing is what Aida mentioned. I really like it. Now I just want to compare science teachers who teach content in English and teachers who teach any content in Kazakh language. So that will be really nice comparison, and that will be really good, interesting article to work on. So I got really nice ideas from that.
Wow.
So, and answering to your question is that I think experience, firstly, specific stereotypes might affect. As I said, yes, it's not at the beginning when I first read about this Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, I thought this is linear. But then when I started reading other articles, I found that it's not linear. There were some respondents who moved back again to the denial stages, who had kind of from denial they really went to, if I'm not mistaken, integration stage. So yes, it's not linear. It's cyclical. It's fluctuated and so on.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that I actually have some ideas based on what you mentioned, because you were mentioning negative experiences, and the word negative brings up the topic of emotions, right? And critical incidents, and like, I don't know, lots of frustration, hatred, guilt, and all those things. And I wonder if like propaganda or deficit-based perspectives promoted on TV and other news might affect their perspectives as well.
Media. Yeah, there is
Yeah.
a media as well
Yeah.
that might negatively impact.
Exactly. And then negative sociopolitical events that might encourage, I guess, I don't know, ethnocentrism, right? And especially events happening in Russia and our neighboring countries might also change their perspective on certain ethnicities or cultures in our country, right? So I think that's something really important to consider. And critical incidents is something that I've heard before in research. So that's something that people say, and then also negative affect, right? Emotions. Yeah, lots of things to consider, but of course I understand that you cannot. Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
I'm just taking notes of what you are saying because you are giving me really nice insights.
Oh yeah, I'm glad.
Do my further research.
Because those are like really important things. And again, deficit-based ideologies or beliefs, right? Those things might come up in your research as well. And I know that you cannot consider all of this stuff in your research, but you might be inspired by one or two things, and maybe they will be more salient in your data analysis or findings, right? So best of luck with your analysis. And I know that we are approaching the end of our meeting. So if there are any final questions from Aida or Asiel, then please share your perspectives or questions. If not, we will ask Shakhrizat to share her final thoughts before we say our goodbyes.
Менің қосатыным жоқ.
Жақсы.
No questions.
Thank you so much. Үлкен рахмет Аида, Әсел қосылғандарыңызға, және де Шахризат Саған да өте үлкен рахмет осындай өзің тақырыбыңды бізге алып келгеніңе, және де I especially want to commend you for sharing your research in progress, right? So you're still kind of working on all these steps, and I feel like our meeting might have helped you with making certain decisions or drawing some inspiration from the conversation, right? So I'm really happy that it's not just for us, but also for you, you know? So yeah. So соңғы ойларыңды бөлсең.
Біріншіден рахмет айтқым келеді, серік болсын, осындай платформада шақырып, шынымен де research'ті біз не үшін жасайтынымызды, негізі research for change, yes? For change, for the improvement and for the development of entire educational system. Және де мен есіме түсіп кетті, бағана сен бір мысалдарды айтып жатқан кезде, бір ата-анамен сөйлескен кезде, сіз кімсіз деді, мен researcherмін дедім да, то есть emerging researcherмін деп айттым да. Сосын маған ата-ананың айтқаны, сіздер қандай жұмыс істейсіздер, ешқандай өзгерістер болып жатқан жоқ қой деді да. Тікелей айтты да. Сосын мен сасып қалдым, не дерімді білмей қалдым басында. Бірақ негізі бір жағынан дұрыс айтады деп ойлаймын, өйткені осындай платформалар керек. Не себепті? Өйткені in order to make change, we do the research. Yeah? And sometimes, yes, we write in a recommendation sections like from policy perspective, for policy makers, this is recommended for teachers, this is recommended, but I do agree with you that it should be ecological and holistic in terms of the change from different perspectives. So yes, that will be good if our voices are heard by all stakeholders, starting from bottom up to the top down policymakers. Және де бұл платформа соған бір мүмкіндік деп ойлаймын, менің ойымша. Және де шақырғаныңа үлкен рахметімді айтамын.
Өте үлкен рахмет. I think that you again shared such an important piece with all of us. We need to promote our research, not just among our colleagues, but also among circles that may be less familiar with our perspectives. We need to translate our ideas into something that matches their kind of understanding, right? Their kind of knowledge. So if it's teachers, we need to think about the practical implications, how this should transform their classroom practices. If it's policymakers, we need to be more policy oriented and provide some steps, right, on how to integrate such perspectives into their work and how they can drive change at their level. So thank you so much for considering these different levels of context, and I hope that your work also considers all this when sharing the publication with the whole world, right? And I hope that your work finds a lot of readers and consumers. So best of luck. Үлкен рахмет бүгін кездесуге қатысқаныңа. And we will stay in touch. And yeah, көре алмаған адамдар жазбаны көріп, YouTube'дан тауып көре алады. Бәріңізге қайырлы түн, немесе қайырлы күн, маған қайырлы таң. Жақсы, сау болыңыздар.
Демалыс болсын, сау болыңыздар.
Bye.